Dynamite!
Hi everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to our first dinner video.
And our last broadcast from home.
That's right. This is, it's Sunday, and this is our last day that we can be at the Dynamite shop. So it feels really special to be able to be here cooking this meal that hopefully you guys will be making next week.
Yeah, and we really stripped it down. So if you were listening in last week or watching on the Zoom webinar, we had a couple of staff here. We're just down to Dana and I because today's the last day in New York State that we're even allowed to come to work. So here we are, we're packing up, and we have something really special for you next week when we'll be all broadcasting from our homes.
That's right, that's right. And it's special too that we're doing these recipes that are recipes that we developed for you guys in our own kitchens.
That's right.
Thinking of you for the Dynamite shop, and now we get to make them for you today. So those recipes are what I think is really in order right now, comfort food.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
and what's nice about this lesson is that, as you guys know, when you've taken dinner home, sometimes we do a little of the work for you. We'll do some chopping. We'll even sometimes make one of the dishes if it's a salad or something quick. But you're doing all the work now. So, and we're going to help you. So we're actually teaching you more than we used to in class. So you're going to work harder. We're going to work harder, and we're going to learn a lot more.
Dinner will get done. It will be delicious. Okay, so this is one of my favorite meals on the planet. It's baked meatballs with a marinara sauce, yum, and
we're making a vegetarian version also.
We are,
yes.
We are, that's right. We're serving that with polenta, cheesy polenta, but you can also have it with pasta if you wish. And we're doing broccoli rabe.
We're blanching it.
We're blanching
Just
it.
like the soybeans last week.
Just like the lesson, continuity. We're repeating some lessons here. And then, because we usually don't do it this way when we do class, but we are serving this menu with garlic bread because we think you guys deserve it this week.
And
right?
that actually came because on Tuesday, I was having my first FaceTime dinner. I've now had 3 FaceTime dinners with my friend Scarlett.
Yeah.
And her parents, Tim and Maria, and they were eating garlic bread. And I was telling you, I could almost smell it and taste it on the screen.
Because it looks so good in your Zoom
And then
dinner.
Dana, as usual, she's like, let's add garlic bread. And I was like, add another thing? And she said yes, so here we are.
We need it, yes. We need some garlic bread.
I'll make some.
Okay, so
I think we're starting off with the meatballs, right?
we're starting off with the meatballs, but actually meatballs are what I grew up eating on Sundays.
Right.
That was like the meal. I grew up in a very Italian-American family. And on Sunday morning, sometimes I would wake up to the smell of sauce simmering, and my grandmother and my mother would have started this great meal. So I think of meatballs as comfort food, and it's not just in Italian-American households. Of course, meatballs all around the world are a comfort food. There's Swedish meatballs, which maybe you've had in a creamy sauce with lots of dill. There's Greek meatballs, keftedes, which have lots of mint and sometimes lamb. Mexican meatballs. What other meatballs?
We've made the meatballs, a similar meatball, but we've had them, you can have them in all kinds of applications. We've made that Italian wedding soup once or twice, I think.
That is right.
With some of our students. So where you make a meatball and then you drop it into a soup and finish the cooking there.
That's right.
So that kind of brings me to asking you about having more than one batch. So are you suggesting that your family would make a whole bunch of meatballs, you'd have some that night, but then there'd be some for the rest of the week?
That's a good point. We would make a big batch, and we would have the whole pot of sauce that would be filled with not just meatballs, but sausage and other things. And it would, of course, get even better as the days went on.
Right.
But I think the reason why meatballs are so good for this week is that we could make a big batch, and we could put some in the freezer and pull it out as the days, as we need them for dinner.
And you could just drop them into some soup.
Yeah.
You could make spaghetti and meatballs.
Make spaghetti and
you could
meatballs
make this
one night.
whole meal again.
Or
I could even see putting them with some eggs in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean,
you can
creative.
make meatball subs for lunch.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, there's just so much having meatballs in the freezer.
What if you? I just touched you.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry. What? We'll have to cut that out. What if we had leftover garlic bread?
Yes.
And we made a meatball sub And that's the bread, the garlic bread.
That would be so good. And wait, what about if you had some leftover broccoli rabe? You could just put some of that in there.
Stop.
So much you can
Make
do
the meatballs.
with meatballs. So one of the reasons why we all love meatballs all around the planet so much is not only because they taste good and they're as like delicious and fun to eat as they are to make, but because they're a great, really smart way of stretching ingredients, of stretching meat. So you have a little bit of meat and you add stuff to it, and the stuff that you add to it stretches it out and adds a lot of flavor. So that's a great thing too about it's one of the reasons why it's such a great thing for new cooks to learn how to make, because the sum of the parts it's greater than the sum of the parts.
Let's get started.
Let's get started. Okay, so we have a big meal that we're making, and whenever we have a big meal, we have to think about what we're going to do first. So you were smart and turned on the ovens. Thank you very much.
I did.
Okay, good. Then one thing that I like to think about is we want to get all of our mise en place. And you guys know we've talked a lot about what mise en place is. That's like setting all of your things out. And I'm looking at the recipes, and one thing that I notice is we need a lot of garlic.
There's a lot of garlic in this menu.
Right? So we have garlic in the meatballs. We have
both versions.
In both versions.
And by the way, Dana is going to make the meatballs with ground beef and sausage. I will be making the vegetarian meatballs. And we will split those two things up, and we'll put a timestamp in the bottom of the video. So if you are a vegetarian and you don't want to watch the meat segment, you can just forward.
Skip ahead. Fast forward.
And then likewise, if you don't want to watch the vegetarian lesson, you can skip ahead to the next thing we're going to do.
That's right.
But we will introduce both sets of ingredients at the beginning. So we're starting with Dana and meat.
That's right.
Which involves garlic.
Right, that's right. So I thought that since we're using garlic so much in this menu, for the broccoli rabe, we need it sliced. For the meatballs, we need it minced. And then you also need it for the garlic bread. So,
yeah, and I'm going to show a third technique that I don't even know if we wrote this into the recipe, but another way of further breaking down garlic. But let's start with the meatballs.
Yes, so this is a good opportunity to practice some knife skills. And we'll review that when we're doing the kitchen hours this whole week. You can sign up for the kitchen hours, and this will be one of the things that we'll be practicing along with some other techniques.
Dana, I wonder before you get started, could you show us your mise en place for the whole recipe so we can see what you have set out?
Sure, sure.
I find that if you cook the way they cook on food TV at home, it's the one thing that actually is helpful to do the same way.
Yeah.
Maybe here in the middle?
Sure. Okay. So then we're going to talk about the meatballs, and I'll tell you a little bit about each of these ingredients that are going in. And I actually find that when we do this, it's great to have your recipe out. And let's just follow the recipe. And I'll go through each item. So we have the ground beef, okay.
And 80 to 20 lean to fat ratio. What is that about?
So when you're making meatballs, you want to pick a beef that has enough fat in it to carry the flavor. So that's one of the things. So 80 to 20 means 20 is the percentage of the fat.
And is that
that's a good thing?
And is that a higher fat or on the lower end of the ground meats you can buy?
So that is a higher fat, right? Okay. So if you see it when you go to the supermarket, if it's 90%, that's probably something like a sirloin blend. This is a chuck blend, and the chuck comes from a fattier part of the cow. But when you're making meatballs, that is a very good thing because, as we know, fat carries flavor.
That's right.
And so we're adding a lot of flavor to the meat, and as it cooks, that fat is going to bake into the sauce that we make, and it's going to be delicious.
But it'll work if I can't find 80-20, right?
Oh, it'll totally work. And in fact, oftentimes I really love to use grass-fed beef, and grass-fed beef tends to be leaner. But what I do is I add more fat. I add more olive oil.
Great.
Or I might add another egg.
Great.
So yeah. Okay, so the next thing that we're adding, just running down the list, if you guys are following me, the sausage. And sausage is something that not everybody puts in meatballs. And that's another thing, can I just say, that is so great about meatballs as a recipe is every cook has their own variation. Everyone has their own little tweak. And in fact, this recipe, which is one that I've been making for years, was inspired by one of our students' grandfathers.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, so he's one of the best cooks I know, and he adds sausage to his, and it adds a lot of flavor.
So for people who eat meat but aren't meat versed, when it says sweet Italian sausage, that means pork, right?
That's right.
So it's so interesting in terms of shopping that something might say ground beef, but then it says sweet Italian sausage.
It's just implied that it's pork.
Well, not everyone knows that,
that's
and
right.
it's important to point that out.
And if you can't find sweet Italian sausage, you can use spicy Italian sausage,
Why not?
which is usually has a little bit of a red hue to it if you like spice.
Great.
All right, so what's next? Going down the list, the cheese. Okay, so the cheese is very important to meatballs, and this is a blend of Parmesan and Pecorino. Now, if you look in my fridge, I always have these two grated cheeses in my fridge because they have very different flavors. The Parmesan adds a little bit of a nutty flavor, and the Pecorino has a little bit of a sharp, kind of a funky flavor that I think is really great. And in fact, it's because it's a sheep's milk cheese, right? So and Parmesan is a cow's milk cheese. So also running down the list, we're going to add a little bit of ricotta. And ricotta is something that I learned from Olive's grandfather. It's a soft cheese, and it's going to act as a bit of a binder for your meatballs, and it's also going to it's going to make them kind of, it's hard to explain. You don't want a dense meatball, but you don't want a meatball that's too soft, and this kind of adds this great texture. So then the breadcrumbs, and the breadcrumbs are essential to a meatball. You really can't have a meatball without it. And now for our gluten-free cooks, you can find gluten-free breadcrumbs, which is fantastic. And what I do is I always use seasoned breadcrumbs. Do you use seasoned breadcrumbs or plain?
You know, I will buy most often plain breadcrumbs or just make my own because I make a lot of bread, which doesn't, fresh bread, after day 2, you're done. So I often find myself with a little bit at the end, and I'll make breadcrumbs. But if I have to buy them, I tend to buy the plain and then I'll add my own seasoning.
Yeah, I grew up with seasoned breadcrumbs, and they have a very oregano-y flavor that I really like. Yeah. But I'm the same. I always have panko breadcrumbs or plain breadcrumbs for other things, but for meatballs, I love seasoned breadcrumbs. But if you don't have seasoned breadcrumbs, you can just add a little bit of dried basil. So garlic cloves, we're going to talk about how to mince those in just a second. Very important. Italian parsley. So fresh Italian parsley, which is the flat leaf kind, what that adds to the meatball is this kind of like bright, fresh flavor, whereas you get the dried herb flavor. It's kind of like in music when you have like a bass note would be the dried herbs, and then the high note would be the fresh herbs. And then we have the Italian seasoning, which I always like to add a little bit extra to my breadcrumbs. The salt, which we always use kosher salt because it's easier to feel as you're adding it. So.
And it looks like you'll need some pepper, which you can borrow from my mise en place.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And then an egg, and the egg is a binder. And not everybody puts egg in meatballs, but it works. When we talk about eggs in baking, we talk about them as leaveners, and they work very much the same way in a meatball. It adds a little bit of
So that's an example of something,
lightness.
if someone didn't have it because they couldn't get eggs, eggs were out at their market, or they don't like dealing with eggs, or they're allergic to eggs, this will work without the egg.
Absolutely.
Partially thanks to that ricotta,
Thanks to that ricotta, yeah.
Great.
I mean, and all of these ingredients are kind of, I don't want to say optional, but you can add a little bit more. You can skip it if you don't have it. So yeah. And then the olive oil.
Great.
Which we're going to use for both cooking it and also add a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah. Let's get going.
Okay.
How can I help?
So let's talk about the garlic and do some techniques, because you're going to need garlic too for yours.
I will.
Okay. So for the garlic, for the meatballs, we are going to need minced garlic. And how much does it say we're going to need? 2 cloves minced garlic. Okay, so this is a technique that I learned from a chef named Peter Hoffman.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. And it's a technique for mincing the garlic. So the garlic clove, you're going to take out the clove. So I can show you. If you start like this was already pre-peeled, but
here's a garbage bowl for you.
Thank you very much. Okay, my center here. Okay, so if you start with one big clove, you want to get one big one. And one interesting thing about garlic is there are two types of garlic. There's hardneck, which has you often see at farmers markets, and it has a big sort of stalk coming out of it.
And it's stiff. Right?
And it's very stiff. And it has great, big, regularly shaped, like hefty cloves. But most garlic that you get in supermarkets are soft neck. So what that means is you get some cloves that are teeny and some cloves that are big. So you want to get the biggest cloves. This is soft neck garlic. You want to get the biggest cloves you can get. And if you're going to, you just kind of like smash it down a little bit and then peel it. But we already have ours peeled, so I can show you this technique. Okay. So we're going to mince this garlic. And what we're going to do is we're going to make 3 slices this way. Then we're going to make 3 slices this way. And then we're going to chop it like that. And that's going to give us tiny little minces. So to do that, very carefully, and if you have your cut gloves, you could put them on your hand. You're going to slice through, but not all the way through. Okay? Just like that. Then you're going to slice through 1, 2, 3. And if you can get more slices, if you have a really big one, you can feel free to do that. Just curl those fingers in. And then we're going to hold with your bear claw. Okay, hold that to keep it in place. And you're just going to mince down, rocking your blade across. Can you see that? And it just comes off like little tiny, tiny pieces. And then when you get down to the end, you can just chop a little bit more like that. And just get that off your blade. And that's your mince. Then what I tend to do is hold my hand over and keeping the tip in one spot, I just kind of go like that. Okay.
Dana, if you're starting the meatballs now, if this is step 1, cutting the garlic, I think it's probably also a good time to preheat your oven if you haven't done that already.
That's right, but you have. Thank you for doing that for us.
Right, but for those of you who haven't, the temperature for the meatballs is 425.
Right. All right, so now we have our minced garlic for our meatballs, which is great because mince means tiny, 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 and as we make the meatballs, the garlic is going to be like distributed throughout. Mm-hmm. But since I'm cutting garlic now, I'm going to cut the garlic that I need for my broccoli rabe, and that garlic just needs to be sliced. So when I'm slicing garlic, it's a little bit easier than mincing. You're just going to get your bear claw and rock your knife and push the garlic clove underneath the knife to get these thin slices. And then that will flavor my olive oil when I'm sautéing. Okay, so let's make meatballs.
Great.
Okay. All right. All right. Here's your garlic bowl.
Thank you.
Garbage bowl. Okay. So for my meatballs, I don't technically have to wear gloves because I'm going to be cooking them, but because it's so messy and fun, I'm going to put gloves on. All right. It would help if these gloves went on easily. Are these the small gloves?
I think it's because your hands might be slightly wet from the garlic and sticky.
Okay.
My hands get sticky when I chop garlic.
Usually when I'm at home, I take my rings off. I don't like to get meatballs in my meatball meat in my hands.
So that's a pound of ground beef.
That's 1 pound of ground beef.
And then it says half a pound, 2 to 3 links sweet Italian sausage. Are you going to squeeze the sausage out?
I am.
Great.
And that's also fun to do. Okay.
I'm just going to put this forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, when you do that, it's a little tricky. You want to hold the casing, and then I'll discard that. What's fun about sausage, too, in meatballs is that it's almost like a little pre-packet of flavor because sausage has pepper in it and it has herbs.
Sometimes fennel seeds.
Fennel seeds, right? Which is interesting, in the vegetarian meatballs you make, you're going to be adding fennel seeds.
That's right.
Okay, so I like to think of sausage as sort of like a pre-made flavor bomb. So then the next in my list is
the Parmesan Pecorino mix.
Okay, I'm just going to add that.
And
That's
then a quarter
great.
cup of ricotta.
Okay. And I'm just going to get everything in there.
And then your breadcrumbs.
My breadcrumbs.
And your garlic.
My garlic, my minced garlic.
And your Italian parsley and Italian seasoning.
Okay.
And then you need a teaspoon of kosher salt and a generous grind of freshly ground black pepper.
About a teaspoon, okay. All right. And what about my egg?
I think you are mixing that all together, and then you're going to beat the egg in another bowl and drizzle it over.
Okay.
I never do it separately. I just put it straight in.
Do you know what I was going to say? That's why I didn't have that set out, because that's how I always do it. But in class, we do it separately.
So I think to see, let's put it up here.
Okay. All right. Now, you're going to get your gloved hands and you're going to get in there and just mix it all up. Okay. This is the fun part. And you're going to squeeze it through your fingers, and that's mixing everything so it's even. And look at that. Now, if you were using grass-fed beef or sirloin beef, you would see that the color would be a little bit pinker. Mm-hmm. But because there's so much of that good fat in this chuck, it's lighter. So that looks good. And at this point, sometimes I might look at it and say, oh, I want to add a little bit more of this, or a little bit more pepper, a little bit more of something else. So I think I have to add now my.
Now you're just going to roll it into some ping pong sized balls.
Okay. Well,
Did you add the parsley though?
No, the parsley has to be added. Okay. I knew it was missing something. Here we go. So I've got my 3 tablespoons of parsley, which is chopped, but not too finely chopped, because I love the color and the flavor. So you don't want it too finely minced, because this is going to cook, and if it's too finely minced, it'll kind of disappear. That's great. Okay. All right, now I'm going to get everything ready to cook this. And at this point, I will say that you could make your meatballs and freeze them and have them. You don't want to cook your meatballs before you freeze them, although some people do. But I find that when they cook, they release so much great flavor into the pan. So I like to cook with that. So I'm going to start getting this ready to roll out. All right, so now I'm just going to roll like ping pong ball size meatballs. Now you can make them bigger if you want. Do you like a small or a large meatball?
I don't like a giant meatball.
No.
Like kind of a medium. That's as big as I go.
Yeah. If I'm making like spaghetti and meatballs, I might make a bigger one. But here we go. This would be a good opportunity to have like the time lapse, the fast, just like.
Yeah.
Okay, so there I have my 12 meatballs, and at this point, some people might want to just put it in sauce, but we're going to do something that gives it a lot of extra flavor. We're going to brown them first, and this is something called the Maillard reaction. We talk about this a lot in class. The browning caramelizes the outside and makes it delicious, but it also helps keep them really sturdy and stabilized so they don't fall apart. Mm-hmm. So let me get out my induction burner, and we're going to cook those.
Dynamite!
All right. Okay, we're going to get our meatballs browning. We're going to turn on our induction burner. It might make a little bit of a noise as it gets going here. Okay, we're going to turn it to medium-high.
So on a gas stove, same thing, medium-high?
Yep, medium-high. Yep. All right, so we're adding 1 tablespoon of olive oil, more or less. And we're using a non-stick pan, but you could use a cast iron, a well-seasoned cast iron pan. And the whole goal here is to get the outside nice and crispy. So we're adding our meatballs. And if you can do it in one batch, great, but I think you're gonna have to probably do 2 batches. Let's see, depending on the size of your pan. Okay. All right. And I like to shake the pan around so I can move the olive oil around. We don't want too much olive oil because we don't want them to fry. We just want them to brown.
You know, in my house, the floor is uneven.
Oh, really?
So when you put something on the pan, on the stove, sometimes
olive oil goes.
Yeah.
All right, so you can smell that cooking. Smells so good. And you can start to smell those seasonings that you put in your meatballs. There we go. Let's see.
I can really
smell
look
at
the
that.
oregano.
Look at that. See that browning? You want to. This is where you want to start working quickly. You can smell the oregano? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. This is where you have to remember which ones you put in first so that you can start to turn them. And you don't want them to burn. But if they burn, that's okay. If they burn a little bit, it's all right. There we go. That looks great. Okay. Shake the pan. Now when you do this, sometimes your meatballs will get a little misshapen and you'll think, oh no, I'm going to have a rectangular meatball. But they a meat cube or a meat pyramid. But they all kind of normalize in the pan when we put them in the oven and they get round again. I don't know how that happens, but it always does. But if you ate a pyramid meatball, it's not the worst thing.
Trapezoidal meatball.
Yes. So this is going to take a couple of minutes as we do this. And see all of that juice in the bottom of the pan, all of that oil is coming out of the meatballs and it's really flavorful. So we're going to want to be careful to, when we transfer it over to our baking pan, that we get all of that great juice out into the pan. There we go. I'm trying to get all the sides.
Is there an argument for a square meatball, a cube? Then you could really do all the sides.
Yeah, maybe. And you could also stack them for transport more easily, like the square watermelons.
Yes.
Maybe we should market that. It could be like the new cronut, square meatballs. That looks so good, doesn't it?
It does. That's the one I had my eye on. I'm trying to predict which one you're going to do next and playing a little game with myself.
It's kind of intuitive.
Okay, let's see.
I think it's this one.
Nope, it wasn't. It wasn't. All right. Try me again. Do one more. Yes! That's the one.
That looks great. I'm browning them all over. They look so good.
So you want pretty much all sides-ish brown.
That's right. That's right.
And then they're going to cook further in the oven. So
they are.
We don't have to worry right now in terms of a meat safety perspective.
That's right.
Great.
I'm not testing the temperature yet because they'll finish cooking in the oven. I think these are almost ready to go. Let's see. Ooh, that one's
good.
Okay. All right. All right, I'm going to shut off my power, and then we could hear each other again. Okay. Hear that sizzle?
Sounds good.
Okay. So now I know in the recipe we call for a rectangular pan, but it really doesn't matter what size pan. It's not science here. It's not like we're baking where it really would matter. So I'm just going to transfer these to my beautiful Le Creuset pan. Evenly space them apart. I can't wait to have these for dinner.
I think we should have them for lunch.
Oh, okay.
Have you had lunch?
I have not yet.
I haven't either.
No. Okay, so see all of that great stuff left over in the pan? We want to make sure that that goes in, drizzled on top. Okay. Okay. All right. Now, the final part of this is the sauce. And here I have a can of crushed tomatoes. You can use whole peeled tomatoes and just using your gloved hands, crush them up. You could also use marinara sauce. And Brianne, during our kitchen hours this week, is going to be showing you how to make marinara sauce. You can even use jarred marinara sauce. I don't love that because it tends to have some sweeteners and other things in there, but if you have it, I know a lot of people like the Rouse sauce. That's a really good one. So we're just gonna pour the tomatoes. All right. So the sauce is in, and now this is going to go into the oven. Thank you, Sarah. Okay. I'm just going to make sure that everything is really nicely coated. Okay, and now this is going to continue to cook in the oven, and everything in the meatballs, all the seasonings that you put in, are going to really flavor that sauce. Okay. All right, that looks great. Okay, so now these are ready to go in the oven, but I'm going to first put some cheese and some black pepper, and that'll get nice and melty as they finish baking. Okay, and we're going to bake them for about 20 minutes, and then they'll be ready to go.
Great.
Okay.
Those smell great.
Don't they?
But not everyone needs a meatball with meat because you can make them vegetarian.
You can.
Let's do it.
I love this recipe.
So what's great is I really like vegetarian dishes that don't have fake meat, that use actual food. So I wouldn't even call these a vegetarian meatball. I'd call them like a lentil ball or something. And it has very similar ingredients to the ones we went over in the meatballs. The big swap is using lentils instead of meat.
That's such a genius swap.
Yeah, it gives it some heft. So what we're gonna put in these meatballs is 3 cups of vegetable broth that you can have either from a can or a box, or you can prepare. Maybe you have some that you made this last week, first week off of school, you stocked up.
Veggie stock. Did I see you were making some veggie stock at home?
I made chicken stock.
Oh, I see.
But I used a bunch of Parmesan rinds.
Well,
so good.
So good.
We're gonna put a cup of green lentils and 1 bay leaf in there. We have some seasoned breadcrumbs, same that you use for the meatballs, and the pecorino blend. We'll need some olive oil and some kosher salt. And the spices we're putting in here are red pepper flakes and fennel seeds. If you don't like spicy, you can just hold the red pepper flakes. I like spicy food, so I'm putting them in.
Good. And you're using the fennel seeds because there's no sausage, so,
right. So
it adds that
fennel.
flavor.
Exactly.
Great.
The other big thing we're adding that were not in yours is some onion in addition to the garlic, just for some more flavor, some more notes, hitting some more notes that might be missed from that meat.
Great.
But same, egg, chopped parsley, garlic, pepper. So we're gonna get to work on these.
Okay.
That's upside down, isn't it?
So how are you chopping the onion? Is it going to be a tiny dice or a mince?
You know, let me put that there. So with the onion, it says diced. This is a meatball. It's not science. It really doesn't matter. I don't think you want it super tiny because it'll get lost, and an onion has water in it, right? So it's gonna collapse. But,
Right.
And you don't want a huge chunk,
Right.
the size of your meatball.
Right.
Somewhere in between. You can tell me when I do it if you'd call that a dice.
Okay.
I might even call it a
It's
chop.
hard. Somewhere in between a chop and a dice.
Right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cook those lentils, and we'll get them on the stovetop cooking while we prepare the onions. So I have already gotten this pan ready. We're not going to use the induction burner just so we can have some space here on the set. So into my pot goes 3 cups of vegetable broth, and the bay leaf, and the lentils. We're using green lentils today. If you can't find dried lentils, but you can find canned, these are challenging times at the grocery store, we know. You could just use 3 cups, or probably a little bit more. These will expand. It'll probably expand to about 4 cups of canned green lentils that are drained and rinsed.
It'll save you a step.
Save you a step. But I was able to find these. We did go to 2 stores. 3?
3.
You went to 2.
I went to 3.
I went to 1.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is going on the stove, and it'll cook until tender. I'm going to add this salt, which I forgot to do, which is 2 teaspoons. And we're just going to simmer this until they're tender, and we'll see how long that takes. We use induction here. People use different stoves. It's hard to give a time on lentils, especially if they're different size lentils, and any will work. You can use yellow, you can use mung dal, red lentils, whatever you can get. So while those lentils are on the stove cooking, I'm going to prepare for my next step, which is cutting an onion, dicing, whatever, and then for cloves of garlic. So we're going to do that tunnel method. Cut off the ends. Got a garbage bowl ready.
We know you guys love chopping onions. We know you love it.
I want everyone at home to be taking bets right now if I'm going to cry.
You put on your goggles if you have them.
Okay.
So these are Spanish onions, right?
I believe they
These
are.
are. And Spanish onions are easier to cut because they're so big and
Yeah, and they're also, if it's fresh enough, this one's pretty fresh, they're nice and tight.
Yeah.
So so many methods for cutting an onion, so many times we've taught it. I'm not going to go too deep in it. When I really want a specific size, I like the 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then chop. But when I'm just doing something quick, I actually don't do that side one. I just do this one. Because we're not going to see these onions. They're really it's just about the flavor.
nice bear claw, Sara Kate.
Thank you. I'm trying to be safe. All right, we've got onion mania here. All right. Okay, so the onions and the garlic, I'm used to a much larger cutting board, I have to say, than the ones we have here at the Dynamite shop.
Well, that was a very big onion.
It was a very big onion. One thing I'm looking forward to with this online cooking with our students is seeing their kitchens and what they're working with.
Oh, that was so cool last week. Everybody sent pictures and we got to see their kitchens and them watching us, watching Brianne as she was doing class. There you go.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, so we're gonna need the onions and then we'll need some garlic. How much garlic is in these? Is it 4?
Let's see.
I think it's 4 cloves.
I think you're right. This is such a good
Look
recipe.
at that. Someone already did that for me. This is how I mince garlic. I liked how scientific yours was, but
Well, it was sort of like the onion technique, but miniature.
yeah, that's exactly what it was actually. Okay, so this is going to saute in the pan just to get some nice flavors going with our spices, with that fennel, and in my case, the red pepper. Can you think of other spices we might add to this? I'm trying to think.
You could add a little cayenne if you like spicy.
You could kind of go in different directions depending on, you could do paprika.
Sure.
I really like smoked paprika.
Oh, I love smoked paprika. You know what I think is really interesting about this recipe as compared to the beef meatball recipe is that you're doing a lot of stuff on the stovetop as compared to what's happening right now in the oven where we had the raw beef and we mixed everything and the work is being done in the oven. But here it's being done on the stovetop. Why do you think that is?
I think that the meat requires a certain amount of cooking attention
Right.
that a vegetarian meatball doesn't.
Right.
All right, we're gonna saute some stuff live here while we have other stovetop stuff going on in the background. Okay, so we are going to do some stovetop or induction burner top cooking, and it might make some noise again.
They're a little loud, and they make this high-pitched squeal that our students know very well, usually when the pan is off of the center.
Okay, so I'm heating this pan. Got my recipe here. We're going to heat a tablespoon of oil and add the onions. So 2 tablespoons are called for in this recipe. So I have 2 tablespoons here. I'm going to use half. Eyeball. Once your oil is nice and hot and shimmering, sort of dancing around the pan, you want to add your onions. Get a nice sound. Sizzle. I feel like that's rocking and rolling a little much for medium. Okay, we're going to add the onions and cook them, just moving them around the pan till they're soft,
Sort of golden.
Yeah, you don't want to burn them.
No.
If you do a little bit, it's okay.
But this is nice because this is adding a little bit of that cooked flavor that you'll mix with the beans. Or the lentils, I should say.
The legume.
The legume.
The legume of choice.
We had a little bit of a hard time finding the dried lentils, and I was thinking we could probably even do this with other beans.
You could really, I bet you could.
Since
Maybe
it's going,
someone at home will try and
let us know. Since it's going into the food processor.
Why not?
Yeah. That looks great.
Speaking of that food processor, I kind of wonder if you could get that food processor and we could set it up on this side. All right, they're starting to soften up and get almost translucent. They're kind of cloudy instead of bright white. So when that happens, you're going to add your garlic, 4 cloves minced.
Okay.
And then I'm going to add my fennel seeds and my red pepper flakes. Almost every recipe that's savory that has garlic and onion, always the onion first in the pan and then the garlic, because the garlic cooks faster and burns easier. It's a good tip.
Yeah.
You can almost not fully follow the recipe. If you see those 2 things, you know, okay, the onions are going to go in first and then the garlic. Okay, so look at that. It smells so good. Do you smell that?
Good, yeah. Yeah, and the olive oil is kind of carrying the flavor of those spices.
That's right. So this mixture is going to join up with our lentil mixture and our breadcrumbs, etc. in this. The lentils are looking pretty good. They're almost done back there. I wonder if we should see if one of them is tender.
Let me test.
Okay, so the key to this is really not to fry it or burn it, but to just release all the flavors, and I think we're getting there. This is where you can tell by the 2 senses, your ear and your nose, and your eyes really, so maybe 3.
I think it needs a little bit more time back there.
Okay, great. So we'll turn this down. Actually, let's just turn it off. Let it sit for a second, and we can start adding to our Cuisinart what we need to make these meatballs.
Sounds good.
Or non-meatballs. Okay, our lentils are tender. We drained off the liquid and we took out that pesky little bay leaf that added so much flavor. So they are ready to go into our food processor. Dump those in there. And we're adding our seasoned breadcrumbs. We're adding our Parmesan. And we're adding our chopped parsley. So I've fitted this with the metal blade, and we're going to pulse a couple of times until it makes a sort of a sticky mixture where there's still some whole lentils, but for the most part, it's the rest of it's smoothed out.
Dynamite!
I just realized I made a mistake. The onions are not in the Cuisinart yet. That's okay. Hard times call for creative solutions.
Happens all the time in cooking.
Does it happen to you?
But it's going to be fine all the time.
Me too. It's funny when you forget something like baking powder when you're making a cake. That's really bad.
Right, but
It doesn't work.
you don't want
in
to.
this case,
Yeah, you
we're
don't.
all right.
You want to find out at this stage that you forgot to add something. Just like before when I almost forgot to add the parsley, I realized because my eyes told me I'm missing something. That doesn't
right.
look like meatballs.
Here we go. All right, just a few more pulses, and I think we're good to go on that.
That looks great.
Okay, so this is our nice mixture, and we're gonna dump it into this bowl right here. Thank you. And when you're dumping something out of a food processor, don't forget that that blade is in there, and you don't want to dump the blade in. You can always fish it out, but just be mindful that it might scoot off. Like that.
I want to take that for you.
Boop. Okay. And then I believe we're going to season with salt and pepper. And I believe we're going to add that egg. Do you like a lot of pepper? Do you err on that?
I love pepper.
Me too.
I'm
My
an
daughter,
over-pepperer.
it used to be no pepper. You know how kids, the one sensitivity was spice, so no pepper. And now at age 13, we're completely out of the no pepper zone. Salt, a pinch and a half.
A little bit more.
Okay.
Great.
So we're also going to put that egg in there. And I'm going to fold that egg in as a binder.
It almost looks like falafel.
It really does look like, it almost smells like falafel too. You could almost do
Some
cumin in there and it would be falafel.
Yum.
Okay. So that looks pretty well mixed to me. And let's form those meatballs or those lentil balls. Okay. These we're going to do a little smaller. We were talking about this earlier because they have different cooking properties and we don't want to make a big one, it'll fall apart. These tend to be a little bit more dry. They don't have all that fat. Remember that fat conversation we had? And in fact, when I've made vegetarian things like this before, sometimes when I'm forming like a patty, if it doesn't stick, you have to add a little bit more fat, basically, so a little more olive oil. So if it doesn't work, don't worry, we'll just add some olive oil. So I'm going to, it's going to be very messy. I'm not going to wear gloves.
Okay. I'm all for that.
Yes. All right. Number one.
So we were just working on some falafel recipes for the Dynamite shop, and we added a little bit of flour and actually a little bit of baking powder. But the flour, I guess, would work just like the breadcrumbs do as a binder.
And if you're gluten-free, all kinds of alternatives. You could use potato starch, arrowroot, cornstarch.
Even the one-to-one flour that we use so much.
So this recipe makes a little bit more, yields, I think, a little bit more number of balls because they're doing them smaller.
I'm going to check on my meatballs.
I bet they're almost done.
They look so good. Yeah, they're almost ready.
I think with the meat and the addition of the ricotta in those other meatballs, they really have like a shield on the outside, like a crispy shield, so they're able to take on the flavor of the sauce, but not fully absorb it.
Yeah, and they retain their shape because you browned them so much. Those look good. What are you going for, 15?
Going for 16, as the recipe says. I think I just lost a 0.02 of a meatball to the floor.
Oh, happens.
I'm curious when we start cooking this week with students if we'll get any dogs in the shot.
We
I'm
saw a
hoping
couple.
so. Yes, did we last week?
We did, and we saw a cat.
We did see a cat. My dog is just my dog is like my Roomba in the house when I'm cooking. It's really, really great.
Her dog is Connie.
My dog is Connie.
My dog is Scooter.
Yes.
So they will definitely be making
an appearance this week. Yes, we are going to be quarantined with our dogs, and Connie is none too pleased about being in the city. She's very antsy. All right, there are 16 meatballs.
That's beautiful.
Non-meatballs. And we're gonna take a quick break and set up for cooking. Okay, we're back. We have set up our little mobile stovetop. If you are cooking from a stovetop at home, just get out a skillet that is nonstick or a well-seasoned cast iron and turn your flame or your heat to medium. Get that pan nice and hot. We're adding the remaining olive oil, which at this point should be 1 tablespoon, but I think actually for this recipe we might need a little bit more.
Let's see.
So you might have a little bit more on hand to just squirt or pour in. And remember, to fry things, you really want the olive oil to be hot so that when the thing you're cooking hits the pan, it doesn't soak up the olive oil, it cooks in it. So the way we know that it's ready is that it's shimmering and kind of dancing around the pan. We're not quite there yet, but I'll walk you through what we're gonna do. We will be cooking these in this pan just like we did with the beef and pork-based meatballs, trying to get a nice even brown on all sides. We'll have to pay a little bit closer attention with these that they don't fall apart, and they may a little bit. It's okay, we can kind of coax them back together. And we're just giving them a head start before we bake them in the oven. So we're trying to get a little bit of browning on all sides, and we'll transfer them into a second sheet pan here. Because this isn't meat, you really could transfer them back to the same exact pan. But in case we have something fall apart, or it's always good to have your setup ready. But if you're trying to save on dishes, you could attempt to use that pan.
I'm all for that.
Yeah, I'm all for that. We have so many dishes. Oh my gosh. There's a reason why the camera goes to a certain width here.
Dishland over there.
All right, and I hope that you've preheated your oven. If you haven't, now is the time. We're cooking these at 375. So we've been preheating our oven. These will be ready to cook once they're out of the pan. I think I see some shimmering now.
Ready to go?
So I'm going to carefully place these in. I'm going to try to work quickly so that we know that they're all evenly cooked. And I like to go around the clock clockwise when I put meatballs in a pan. I'm going to agitate the pan a little bit because that olive oil is on the non-stick, kind of congregating in certain areas. I think I can get them all in. You can do 2 batches though if you don't have a big pan.
Yeah.
What's the question?
I was wondering if you tend to use cast iron or non-stick more.
I have a lot of cast iron. I have 3 different sizes. I have one that's little. It's the size of 1 fried egg, a little bit bigger. I use that one a lot. I use it for toasting nuts, for
spices.
toasting spices.
Yep. And eggs for a single serving.
Yep. I have a medium one, next step up, probably maybe 8 inches. And then I have a big 12-inch that we use all the time. We roast chicken in it all the time.
I use it for everything.
Steaks.
Yep.
I use it to make caramelized onions. I use it.
And you would use it for this?
I would definitely use it for this.
Me too.
I think I have a nonstick skillet somewhere that I may have bought for a job when I was testing recipes. I really don't use nonstick skillets.
I'll use nonstick for fish sometimes.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
But my cast iron skillets live in my. I use them all the time.
Yeah, ours
live
actually
on my stove.
live on the stove.
Yeah.
I don't put them underneath. That's partially because I don't want people scratching them up.
Yeah.
Recently re-seasoned the 12-inch.
Yeah.
And that was quite a job. It was really hard to scrape off all the stuff that
I like to do that on the weekend. I'll do it from time to time. I have this 17-inch one that Lodge makes that I use for paella. What did I make? Oh, I made kimchi rice last week, and it's great for getting that crunchy on
like in
the bottom
Persian rice
of the pan.
Nice.
Yeah, like the Persian
rice,
yeah.
This is kind of what we're going for. And they don't roll around too much unless you form perfect round ball shapes. But I think we're basically covering all the sides.
They're browning nicely. You almost didn't need any extra oil.
I did a little oil bonus. I think I had bumped it up by a teaspoon or so. But if things were if there was a lot of smoke, and you weren't seeing the sizzling like that, you were seeing like a dry heat, it's not a problem unless they're falling apart.
Right.
And then you could always squirt in some extra.
What's nice about this, it's the same thing, the same Maillard reaction. So it's not only adding a crisp exterior, but it's really intensifying the flavor.
Yeah, here you can see a little bit of onion on that one. I don't know if you can see the piece of onion, and that'll be a little sweet.
I could definitely smell it.
Flavor
It's great.
bomb. All right. I think these are getting there.
You guys love doing this in class. You love the browning. You do a great job with it.
Okay.
It does tend to get smoky in here when we do it. It's getting a little smoky now.
So we're barreling through our menu. We have your meatballs are almost done.
Almost
About to
done.
Take them out.
Yep.
And we'll put mine in the oven, and then I think we're moving on to some polenta.
Let's
Is that
do
the
it.
order of things?
Polenta and broccoli rabe.
That's right.
Yep.
All right, so I'm gonna line these back up. I'm gonna use the same sheet pan so we don't have to wash the other one.
These are going to be delicious with the marinara, but I could also see eating this with like maybe a salad with a yogurt drizzle.
Yeah, it's feeling, I think because
Right?
we're kind of thinking about falafel, we're
Yeah.
thinking like tzatziki or like a tahini dressing.
That
I'm
would be
feeling
good.
kind of Middle Eastern about this myself.
Even with the marinara, you could add some cumin and make sort of a spicy marinara. See, that's the thing about cooking. Once you understand these techniques that we're going over, you can have fun with it, riff with it, roll with it.
All right, so I have the oven at 375, and we're just gonna pop those in. Oops, except for I'm stuck on my
Here,
leash.
can I help you?
Look at that.
In they go.
Okay, so those will be cooking in our oven at 375 for about 20 minutes. So when we're done, we will pull them out and show you.
Okay, my meatballs are out of the oven.
Great.
They look great.
They look really done.
They smell great. Look at that sauce. But there's one important thing that I have to do. I have to check the temperature. So let me get my thermometer. Let's see here. I'm going for 165. This is my handy dandy little instant read thermometer. OXO makes it, I love it. And we're going for 165. And we're at it. We're good.
Great.
Good to go. So before I serve this, I'm going to want to add a little bit more cheese.
Riddle me this.
Yes.
I'm not great at math, but I think I've counted 3 different incidents of you adding cheese.
I'm always going to add cheese.
Yep, thought so.
Look at that. And then
so good.
pretty with the parsley. And then that's good to go.
Yeah, let's see if you can make sure everybody
Yeah.
can see that.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
And now at this point, I could either have this with pasta or like we were talking about meatball subs or something, but we are going to serve this with polenta. And polenta is a cornmeal from it's very popular in northern Italy. It's eaten across Italy. And it's basically the same ingredient that we use to make cornbread, right? And it's super easy, super simple, great to work with, and it's just like the ideal comfort food. So let me get this going. We can move my meatballs.
So your setup for that is you're back at the stove, right?
That's right.
And you're using a fine cornmeal, right?
I am using a fine cornmeal.
But I, in a pinch, have done it with a coarse.
You can. You
Not
can.
bad. You just have to make sure it's cooked down.
That's right. And the texture is going to be a little bit more, well, coarse,
Yeah.
but a little bit more rustic. This is a smoother, more porridge-like cornmeal. So I have 4 cups of water. I'm going to bring to a boil. Okay, my water is boiling.
Great.
I'm going to get ready to add my polenta. I'm going to add it very slowly and whisk it so that I don't get any lumps. Okay, but you have to be careful because it's starting to really boil, so I'm going to turn it down a little bit.
So you have 4 cups of water and 1 cup of
And
cornmeal,
1 cup
right?
of cornmeal. Yep. And just whisk as fast as you can, trying to prevent those lumps. And you'll see it'll start to thicken up immediately. Thank you. And you'll start to think, okay, this looks like a porridge. This is done, but no, it needs to cook for about 30 minutes because you're cooking away that, that starchy flavor, and it's going to get really creamy. And I'm going to add some cheese. I'm adding Parmesan, just a little bit. I'm going to whisk that in.
So in the recipe, it talks about adding the cheese after the 30 minutes.
You know, you can, or you can add it now because I want to season it and see if I want to add a little bit of ricotta.
Okay.
You know, Parmesan is a little saltier than, of course, ricotta, but I have some salt once I taste a little bit later. It's starting to bubble. See those big bubbles happening?
Yep.
Right? And whenever I make polenta, I always like to keep a little bit of water or even some milk or cream off to the side. I love it that I could make something like this with just water. But you would think that something this creamy and delicious would be made with cream, but no. So I'm going to go set this over on my stove top, and I'm going to make my green vegetable for this dish.
Great.
Okay, our polenta is cooking.
Great.
And we are going to do our green vegetable because we have our meatballs or our lentil balls, we have our polenta, we will have our bread, our garlic bread. So we need something green and delicious. So we are going to do broccoli rabe, or anything you have or want.
I mean,
really.
broccoli obviously works.
Would be
You could
great.
do anything that you would blanch. You could do green beans.
Swiss chard.
Swiss chard.
So this really demonstrates why cooks like to blanch, because I did this ahead of time. This is one large bunch of broccoli rabe, right here. Okay, one large bunch. And I blanched or shocked it about a half hour ago.
The same amount.
Same amount, and this is what I'm left with. So, shocking or blanching, for those who didn't follow along last week when we demonstrated it, is when you bring a big pot of water to a boil, and then you quickly submerge your vegetable and to bring it up to temp and make it bright green. It'll float up to the top, and then you strain it and submerge it in icy water.
Immediately.
And that shocks the cooking, stops the cooking, and you're preserved with a vegetable that is ready to be sautéed and brought up to temperature again. So let's do that. So we're gonna get our skillet hot. Okay, now this broccoli rabe, I'm going to give it a quick chop because right now it's still long pieces, okay? And I've squeezed out all of the extra water because you don't want to add water to your pan of oil.
How much oil are you using for this?
So for this, I'm using 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, but you could do a little bit more. And once the pan is hot, we're going to get it shimmering.
We've got to leave it up front.
And get it nice and hot. It's already starting to shimmer. When it shimmers, it gets kind of like even glossier, starts to move. Sparkly. Okay. And then I have my garlic that I sliced earlier. And the reason why we don't want to use minced garlic here is we don't want it to cook that quickly. If it were minced, it would cook super quickly, and it might even get a little bit bitter or brown, and that's what we always want to avoid when we're cooking garlic or sautéing garlic. So I think that's hot enough. I'm going to add that to the pan. Could you please hand me a wooden spoon? Thank you. Okay. Thank you. And it's really important to make sure once this starts to cook that you have it down, that you lower the heat, that it's not on high. Okay. Can you smell that garlic?
Immediately.
Right?
I can also smell the olive oil.
Right? It's great. Okay. So now, I'm just going to add my chopped, blanched broccoli rabe. Hear that sizzle. Okay. And how easy is that? I mean, it's just heating it up. You want to be careful that you're not burning that garlic, but you want to move it around. Now at this point, sometimes I'll add a little bit more olive oil if I want. But the important part here, and my favorite part, is adding, and the kids love this, doing this in class, adding my lemon zest. So I'm just going to zest the lemon, being careful not to zest the white part. Once it gets like that, we're going to move on to another part of the lemon. And you could already start to smell that aromatic, perfumey, kind of lemony smell from the rind and the skin. And it's also really pretty.
Beautiful,
isn't it? Okay. I'm just going to saute a bit more, and it's almost done, but what I'm going to do is use that lemon, and I'm just going to squeeze it over. Okay. I think I got a pit in there. Might have to get that pit out. If I was being super precise about it, I would use my juicer. There we go. And I think that's done.
You have a salt and pepper seasoning?
Yep. Yep, always want to season. Let's see. A little bit of salt. And a little bit of pepper. Okay.
That looks delicious.
And let's see here. Okay, now at this point, what I always do, thank you, Sarah. What I always do at this point is add a little bit more, if I have it, of lemon zest. Just because it looks so pretty when I bring it to the table with those bright yellow zests on top. Okay, so that's good to go. Okay.
We're really barreling through this meal.
We are.
We are.
We are.
You want to make some garlic bread?
Let's make garlic bread.
All right, garlic bread it is. This is the least complicated of our recipes today. Here's our mise en place. Pretty simple. What you need for this dish is 4 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter. If you only have salted butter, it's fine. I keep a lot of unsalted butter in my house because I bake a lot, and unsalted butter often is the ingredient for the butter in baking. But as I said before, these are challenging times. Whatever butter you have, 4 tablespoons, which is also half a stick, and we have a whole baguette, whatever size you can get. Even if they're just slices of bread, or you have a bag of sandwich bread, we're open here. We're gonna roll with what we have. A large clove of garlic. And some chopped parsley, pretty fine, about 3 tablespoons or so. This is really a matter of taste, this one. So what we need to do first is to mince the garlic super fine, and I'm gonna show you a way of making essentially a garlic paste, just taking it one step further. So what you need to do a garlic paste is you need your nice big clove of garlic, and we're going to mince it like we were before, either Dana's fancy method or my kind of...
Your rough chop.
My less fancy method. And once the pieces start breaking down into smaller chunks, add a pinch of salt. And what salt does, if you were all here, I almost said, does anyone remember? If you guys were here, you add salt, for example, when you're caramelizing onions or mushrooms, and what it does is it's almost like it unlocks the door to some moisture, so it lets out moisture. And when you're cutting garlic, it can get kind of sticky, and so what happens is if you sprinkle just a little bit of salt into that mixture, it actually makes it move around easier. It makes it not clump up, and it releases some of the moisture. And you're just gonna keep chopping across until you get some really, really fine mince. Careful not to drag. If you're one of those people, use the back of your knife. But if you do it lightly like I did, you don't need to switch it over. Okay, so.
I feel like the salt also acts almost like an abrasive.
Yeah, so that's the other thing it does. Just like sometimes you can use salt to clean out a pan, or like an old, if you get like an old porcelain sink and you need to get stains out, the way they used to do it was with coarse salt. So that also is what it does. It kind of rubs it down into something that's a little bit softer. And so when I get it to be super fine like this, I usually add one more pinch of salt, and then I move the action from chopping to like a mash like this.
This requires a little bit of skill. I mean, it's fun to try, but you really do, right? Have to push down.
You really have
pull.
to mash it, and without the salt, it's not really going to work so well. Another thing salt does is, you know how it melts snow and it breaks down what's on the sidewalk after there's an ice storm or a snowstorm and things freeze? It's kind of acting in the same way. It's kind of like letting things release.
Same concept.
It's breaking down the cells that are inside the garlic. And you could make truly a paste, although if what you're after is a lot of garlic paste, I would suggest you use a food processor instead.
Yeah.
A lot easier. But this is just a fun way of making a really uniform garlic flavor.
It's a great technique too.
Garlic burns really easily, so when you're making garlic bread, you probably don't want big chunks the way Dana had in her broccoli rabe, because you notice with that dish, she cooked it really fast, so there was no danger of burning. But we're doing this in the oven, and the garlic will be exposed to the heat. All right, that's a lot of talking. That was basically me passing time while I made this paste. Okay, so now we're gonna make an even bigger paste. We have, you know what I need? I did set it out. I need a spoon. Okay, so my recipe says 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Can you pass me the olive oil?
Yes, ma'am.
Sometimes you just like to mix up the fats. It's not necessary. You could do 6 tablespoons of butter. You could just do 4 tablespoons if you can't find the olive oil because you used it all up making your meatballs or your broccoli rabe. I'm not even measuring. That's about 2 tablespoons.
Okay.
It's just to add another flavor dimension to it. You have something more fruity.
I often layer those 2 flavors.
Yeah, me too, especially in sauces.
Yeah.
I'm gonna do most of this parsley. I really like kind of a green vibe in my garlic bread because it reminds me, actually, my grandmother made garlic bread with parsley, and she used curly parsley. I don't even know that there was flat leaf Italian parsley in Los Angeles in the 80s, but there we are. All right, then we're adding this garlic, of course.
And I think doing the fresh minced garlic like this, as compared to the kind that you buy in the store already done, it has that kind of like, I don't know, that acidic flavor. I don't like that as much.
Well, there's also, there's usually sodium benzoate in that minced garlic stuff in the store, and that's a preservative that's in so many things. Here's a fun quarantine project. To go through your pantry and see how many things contains sodium benzoate. Okay.
So are you making a compound butter there?
I'm basically making a compound butter that's a little looser because of the olive oil, although like I said, you don't need the olive oil. I'm kind of making paste 2.0. It's kind of a compound butter, but we're not going to use it. Where did we use compound butter? We used it in sweet potatoes in a lesson.
Sweet potatoes, yep.
This actually would probably be pretty good on a sweet potato.
Great.
We're gonna make this this paste to spread over our garlic, our baguette. So let's talk about, I'm gonna flip that over. Let's talk about how we're gonna cut it. So you're lengthwise and crosswise.
So you're using a serrated knife, not your chef knife.
Much easier to cut bread with a serrated knife. So we're gonna cut it in half lengthwise. So you could also argue that if you saw the instruction in half lengthwise, that it would be this way. But I think you know if you've had garlic bread, you want it this way. Although that would make some fun chunks.
Yeah, that would be fun.
It wouldn't be the end of the world. There's kind of no big mistakes in this whole meal.
There's so many creative ways you can do garlic bread. You can also do it this way.
Well, we're gonna do that also.
Yeah. Okay.
We're gonna double down.
Right.
Okay, so pressing on the top, keeping the knife parallel to the cutting board, and sawing. And you can go slow as you want, just to be safe and to try to keep things even. Make sure you're about halfway up and down on both sides. I can tell this is a good baguette.
Do you know, that's that great baguette from that.
Look at that.
Yes, look at that.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to split this in half, more or less. That looks pretty good. Okay. I think this guy got a little bit more. Okay, get that over there. And I'm gonna spread it around.
The garlic bread is always the thing to go first in this meal. Everybody gobbles up the garlic bread.
I try to ration my bread, my garlic bread allotment in a meal, and sometimes it's just like, you know what? I want it now. It's so good. I can tell this is gonna be really good. I'm really glad we get to eat this. Okay, so look, the proportions of this recipe for the baguette that we happen to buy today are absolutely perfect, nice and thick. Dana, I'm gonna admit something to you about the way I like to make garlic bread.
Please? What's that?
It's not in the recipe. Can I off-road for a second?
Go for it.
I might sprinkle some of that pecorino mixture
I
on
was
there.
just thinking the same
I don't
thing.
know.
Here.
Okay,
Do you have
so
any?
we spread it on the bread. We're going to slice. So what this said is to place the bread on the baking sheet, cut sides up, spread the butter mixture. We're doing the baking sheet in a second. Sprinkle with salt, and without cutting all the way through, slice 1-inch wide pieces crosswise. So what that's about, I'm actually not going to do it on the sheet pan.
Okay.
Maybe we'll rewrite part of that recipe. But what that means, you don't have to do this, but this is so that people can literally, when it comes out of the oven and comes on the table, they can just
tear it,
attack it, and just tear out pieces. And they're pre-portioned, so you can't say like, "Oh, my brother took half of it," because there won't be half to tear off. So you're slicing, but not all the way through. Do you see that? Slicing, but not all the way through.
So this is like pull apart.
It's pull apart
garlic bread.
Oh
Yum.
my gosh, that made me think about monkey bread.
Yes, I love it.
I think we should do a monkey bread lesson.
You should.
So I'm just doing this. It's like a courtesy slice.
Yeah.
They're 1 inch or so, or whatever you think is a reasonable serving. If we're going to do that leftover garlic bread for sandwiches plan, you might leave one whole.
So what I like about baking these open and not closed, a lot of recipes call for like putting the loaf back together, rolling it in foil and baking it. What I like about this is it's almost like bruschetta.
Exactly.
It gets crispy on top.
All right, so are we going to do one dose of cheese? Do we still have cheese out?
Let me see. I don't think we have any cheese here.
That's okay.
That's okay. Good idea.
If you have cheese left over from this lesson, sprinkle it on top. I'm going to go with a little bit of salt, just a tiny little pinch. If you used salted butter, you probably don't need this. I also am a big fan of salting after, so that you not only get the salt flavor, but you get the salt crunch.
Yeah.
So if it's not salty enough, you could have a little, before you put it on the table, you could just do a little chef's taste the end. Oh, needs
Maybe
a little
some
salt.
flaky salt, like some Alden salt.
Some Alden salt. All right, so this bread is going to go in the oven. It's going to be baked until toasty on top, which is about 10 minutes. And we have the oven at 425, which is the same temperature for the meatballs. So if you were making the meatballs, you could have just left the oven on. So I'm going to give this to Dana because my leash is short.
Thank you.
We have a little bit of a mess here.
Should we check on your lentil meatballs?
Yeah, I think those are done.
Okay, let's see. Oh yeah, they look great. Look at that. They look great.
They look really good. They really look like falafel.
Yeah.
I'm going to try one. Can you try one?
Yeah. They're really good.
They're really good.
Okay.
I'm definitely feeling a sauce. I'm almost feeling like a dip. Really, really good.
We could do that.
Okay, so when our polenta's done, our
Polenta's
broccoli
done.
rabe is done, both balls, meatballs and lentil balls are done. We put the garlic bread in. We've got 10 minutes till that's done. So what do you say we do some dishes and set the table? And
Sounds
then when our garlic bread is done, we're going to show you
have
the
a
whole
feast.
spread. All right, awesome.
Dynamite!
Oh
Whoa.
boy.
That looks
Looks so good. Look at this meal.
Okay.
And the polenta's done.
The polenta is done.
Creamy, cheesy.
Yep. Maybe a little bit of black pepper.
Sure.
Do you mind?
Not at all.
You want to taste and season. Maybe it needs a little bit more salt, maybe a little bit more cheese at this point. That looks great. Okay. And I'm just going to put some on the plate.
So this is sort of the serving suggestion.
That's right.
The plating.
Okay. And
Wow,
those
that looks
meatballs.
Really, really beautiful.
Right?
You know, I like to, for leftover polenta, I like having it for breakfast.
I love it. In fact, we were just
Maple syrup we were
maple
talking
syrup,
about. Yeah.
delicious.
But even savory, because it has the cheese in it already.
And do you know what I do with leftovers? I'll bake it. I'll put it in a
Yep.
sheet pan like this, bake it, and cut it into
Slice
squares.
it.
Yeah. Look at that. That looks so good, guys.
Beautiful.
Okay. And then a little bit of broccoli rabe.
And the garlic bread, should we pull at it?
Go for it.
Look at that. It just comes right off.
I have a slice.
Yes, I'm gonna let you social distance your bread. Cheers.
Cheers. Have a great meal, guys.
Oh, that's so good. So here's the hope. The hope is that you've watched this video and it's either inspired you to immediately start making the menu, maybe even cooked along and paused. That could work.
You've learned a lot.
Maybe you've gone through the timestamps on the YouTube page and figured out which things you want to do and when.
You can go back to it if you need to review.
And maybe you've signed up for one or all three of our kitchen hours this week.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Hosted by Brienne. Some extra skills, some practice, some chit chat, some I'm lonely, I feel isolated, I want to talk to my friends, I want to talk to my teachers, I want to talk to Dana and Sara Kate. We're all going to be there.
The cool thing about it is we're using the Zoom meetings instead of webinars, so you'll be able to see everybody, which is really cool.
And talk to people.
And talk to them.
And then the big bang is our Friday Dynamite dinner party.
That's right.
We know you don't have theater tickets, so join us on Friday when we will take you through in real time. Obviously, this was edited today. We will take you through in real time, just like we did last week on the Zoom webinar, different technology.
Using the Q&A for your questions.
And make sure you have this document printed out that has all of the recipes, it has all the key takeaways. We're using the same document now that we emailed you and that we have uploaded onto the special student portal, which is on the dynamiteshop.com, our online kitchen, and in the pull-down menu, there is the Winter 2020 class materials.
There's a
There's
secret,
a secret
password.
So get yourself set up, and we're so happy you're with us, and we're so happy we can give you a place to do all this.
Yeah, we're so glad that we can cook with you on Friday. I'm already getting excited about that meal.
Dana's hosting that one.
I'm hosting. We're going to be taking turns. All of our teachers will be there, but you'll actually be inside my house, which feels really great.
And maybe Scooter will be there.
And Scooter will be there, and my family will be there, and you and your families will hopefully be there.
Yes.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Curtsy. Bye.
Bye.